Good YouTube, this is the Texans Better Talk Show. Let's talk about the draft a little bit. The Texans currently are picking number 25 in the first round in the draft. Now, this is of January 21st. This is all subject to change. This is also before the Senior Bowl and other events like that, the Combine, before all of that. And we know that, Nick is bound to make changes as the GM. He loves making trades. He likes bouncing around. You'll remember last year they traded back out of the first round and used a second they gained to go get Stephon Diggs. So this is all tentative, but it's a fun exercise to do. The Texans currently draft at 25. I'm going to break this down by the two position groups I think we need to address. Maybe some kind of unrealistic wants and players that we could, unrealistically hope to have, and then also some legitimate players that we could possibly hope fall into our laps. And so there's two position groups I really wanted to get into, and the first thing I want to get into is the wide receivers. Now, look, let me preface this by saying Garrett Wilson, I would love for him to be a Texan. He's probably a little bit too expensive than what Nick is, again, this is me speaking, but than what he's comfortable giving. You're probably going to have to give up, a first and a second, or maybe a first and a first, and you're going to have to pay Garrett Wilson. So I don't know if Garrett Wilson makes sense financially. And Stephon Diggs, I know the team loves him. I know the team wants him back. He did blow out his knee, or excuse me, he tore his ACL. He's older. He's 31 years old. Torn ACL. He's never had a significant injury. He's never had to battle back from that, combined with his age. Look, I love Diggs. I don't want to see Diggs re-signed unless you get him for really cheap, because he was kind of in an interesting situation being a contract year. If you can get him for cheap, good. I don't want to overpay for Diggs. And that leads me to kind of reason with and say, actually, let's talk about Tank Dell too. Tank Dell's not playing this season, next season, most likely. He'll probably come back later in the 2026 season. So your wide receiver group outside of Nico Collins is in shambles. And we kind of saw that against the Chiefs. No one could really step up for a majority of the game. And so that's why I think wide receiver is a great position to draft, and a need for sure for the Texans. Now, doing a couple mocks, kind of looking around, you probably have around 4 receivers that go in the first round. That's including Travis Hunter. And so let's just say 3 receivers, because a lot of people consider him to be a cornerback, which I do myself. So you've got 3 receivers that go in the first round. That's kind of, a guesstimate. I do think there could be 4 to 5. It just depends on what the NFL community thinks. If, NFL GMs really like what they see in a player and they start to reach. We kind of saw that in this past year draft with, Ricky Pearsall, I believe, going in the first, Xavier Legette kind of going in the first. 2 solid players, but you felt that teams were really kind of reaching because of how many receivers were taken off the board in that draft. In this draft, I don't think there's as much talent necessarily in the first round. There is talent though. And so I think there's, again, around 3 receivers that are taken before you. And maybe you get to pick the 4th receiver off the board. And so here's my unrealistic draft scenario. And super unrealistic would be Ted McMillan out of Arizona State University. He's not going to be there. If he's there, draft him. And that's all I'll say about him. Luther Burden is a little more controversial. I think there's no way he gets to 25. But some people, I've seen some mocks, they think Luther Burden somehow gets to 25. Maybe there's a big tackle run in this kind of lengthy tackle class. I love Luther Burden. Also, his stats weren't as impressive this year as they were last year. I don't really think that's his fault. I think it's kind of a product of the offense he played in and the role he played. But if Luther Burden's there at 25, take him. Now, let's start getting realistic with this wide receiver group. The only receiver that I would want the Texans to take in their current draft spot, if they were to choose to take a receiver, is Emeka Egbuka. And let me just give you a couple of reasons why I really believe in Emeka Egbuka. Number one, the Ohio State connection. He caught passes from C.J. Stroud. That's important, that chemistry. He's never really been elite at any one thing, but he's a solid receiver whose floor is extremely high. At Ohio State, he plays a lot in the slot. He's 6'1", 205 pounds. He finished this year with over 1,000 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns, if you include that, and a college football championship ring. So that's nice with him. Plays a lot in the slot. He's very high IQ. He understands the game. He knows how to get open in zone coverages. He has great hands, and he's a very decent run blocker. His run blocking might be overrated, honestly. But, the thing you get with Emeka Egbuka, you get a high floor wide receiver 2, potentially wide receiver one. We don't see him run outside too much at Ohio State. I don't think that's because he can't do it. I just think they have other talent. He's not a Jeremiah Smith by any means, but he's a solid receiver who, from day one, he's going to be able to get in the slot and he's going to be able to, run quick routes that Stroud's going to be able to hit him on. Very consistent. I would definitely consider him to be a first round pick. And I think the Texans, a late first round pick, that I think the Texans are in, prime position to take advantage of. Now, moving on from that, let's say Emeka Egbuka goes before the Texans can get to him. There's no trades or things like that. I don't love the other receivers, what I would consider day two receivers that other people might like. I don't like Isaiah Bond from Texas. He's 5'11", 180 pounds. Kind of gives you that Nico Collins. I'm sorry, not Nico Collins, that Tank Dell type of player. I just, we've obviously know what happened with Tank Dell, very injury prone, for better or for worse. I think Isaiah Bond's not as polished as Tank Dell. I don't think he's a day one receiver. Just don't reach. Again, I really think Emeka Egbuka is your guy. Some people might argue Jaden Higgins, Trey Harris, Elik Ayomanor, big guy from Stanford. Again, great talents. Try to get them in the second round. If there's a receiver that you're going to take in the first round, it better be Emeka Egbuka. That's pretty much all I'll say about the Texans in the first round. Now, the elephant in the room, obviously talking about these receivers, is that offensive line. And I actually think this tackle class is very beneficial for the Texans because I think there's a lot of tackles that can play guard and that will be guards in the NFL, whether it's their smaller size, shorter arms. Arm length is a huge thing when it comes to tackles. And so I've got like 4 or 5, maybe tackles that go before, the Texans pick at 25. And I will say off the bat, I've seen a couple mocks where this has been the case. I don't think it will be the case, but if Will Campbell somehow slips to 25 because, teams don't believe he'll be a good tackle and they're not looking for a guard, again, don't think this is going to happen. I've seen it happen. Take Will Campbell, the tackle from LSU, 6'6", 323 pounds. His arm length is below 33 inches, which I've been told is kind of like that magic number for a tackle. You need long arms. He's below that. His arm length isn't great. If for some reason that's why he falls in the draft, Texans, go pick him up. Forget Emeka Egbuka. Go hit Will Campbell. Move him to guard, and you've got a solid right guard or left guard, wherever you want to play him for a long time. Really high IQ player. He really knows how to play the position. Kelvin Banks Jr. is the other tackle prospect that I think a lot of people will be talking about. I think he's more of a tackle. We don't need a tackle. The Texans are drafting a tackle not because they need a tackle, because they're going to move him to guard. We don't need a tackle. We have Blake Fisher, Laramie Tunsil. I think he still stays for a while. So again, we're drafting a tackle to move him to guard. A lot of people are high on Wyatt Milam. I don't think he's a day one pick. I don't think you pick Wyatt Milam, the tackle from Texas, I believe. No, he's not from Texas. I forget where he's from, man. But Wyatt Milam, I don't believe you take him. He's 6'6", 295 pounds. He's a junior. I think it'd be more of a reach. I do understand that he could make a really good guard in the league. Again, just don't know if day one you want. Again, it all depends, too, on how the draft board plays out. If a lot of tackles come off the board early, you might have to reach for the position if Emeka Egbuka's not there. But I do think that he's a little bit more of a reach. Josh Simmons as well, the Ohio State tackle, 6'5", 310, had a knee injury. And this is kind of an interesting prospect for the Texans because he had a knee injury. A lot of people argue he would have been OT1 in this draft. Has that knee injury, gets surgery, only plays around half of the season. Now Kelvin Banks Jr. and Will Campbell kind of overtake him. Josh Simmons, to me, is more of a true tackle. But if the Texans want to roll the dice, again, he's coming off a knee injury he just suffered, so that could cause him to drop a little bit. If the Texans want to roll the dice on him, I wouldn't hate it. I think he's more of a true tackle, but feel free to disagree. I know a lot of people don't necessarily agree with that. And then the last tackle that I'll really talk about is Jonah Savaiinaea. I don't know how to say his last name. 6'3", 330-pound junior. I really think this guy he could be there, in my opinion. And I really think he will play guard. And so, again, it's not about finding a tackle. It's about finding a tackle you're going to move to guard. And who knows? There's a lot of teams that pick in front of the Texans that need to strengthen their O-line that probably will. Jets, Dolphins, Patriots, just to name a couple. But I do feel like there are some prospects that teams that want tackles will pass on because they're not true tackles. but it seemed like the Texans could really take advantage of and move them into guard. And so again, I think the Texans are in a great position. Emeka Egbuka should be around where you're picking. You should have a lot of guard options, tackle guard options. And so I really think you either go offensive tackle with this pick or you go wide receiver with Emeka Egbuka. But let me know what you guys think. Do you agree with kind of what I'm saying? Do you want to adjust the defense for some reason? One caveat, I will say, very small. If the tight end from Penn State's there, Tyler Warren, take him and don't blink about it. He probably won't be there, but that's the one caveat. Like if Tyler Warren's there, ignore the positional needs. And you do need a tight end. I mean, realistically, Dalton Schultz isn't looking great. So go get Tyler Warren. That's all I'll say about that, though. So thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you think about this draft spot. Who should they take? And I'll see you on the next one, man. Peace out.